Aloha kako, mahalo for joining our webinar today. My name is Michelle Kauhane and I serve as our Senior Vice President and Chief Impact Officer at the Hawaii Community Foundation. I will serve as your moderator this morning as we present to you the next installment of our AO series. AO literally means a call and response, signifying the dialogue that we want to engage in during today's webinar, where we bring you inside the Maui Interim Housing Plan. That means we want to hear from you, so please be sure to submit your questions using the Q&A button, and we will be sure to submit those questions to our guest speakers and get to as many of those as we can. Our intention with this webinar and the entire AO series is to give you access to the experts, decision makers, and leaders on the ground in community. For those of you who may be new to the Hawaii Community Foundation, we're a 108-year-old organization with a vision to create equitable and vibrant Hawaii in which all of our island communities thrive. We are working to address the root causes of some of our state's most difficult challenges, partnering with government leaders, nonprofit organizations, and community members in communities across Hawaii to create systems change. Today, we'll be hearing from speakers who have been pivotal in establishing and executing the Maui Interim Housing Plan. And before we get to them, I'd like to hand this over to our President and CEO, Micah Kane, to welcome you and to set the context for our discussion today. Micah?
Mahalo, Michelle. First off, aloha kako, everyone, from wherever you are around the world. Thank you for joining us this morning. Over the past year, the Maui Strong Fund has made significant positive impact to the people and place of Maui. Today is about sharing with you some of the specific investments we're making around housing. During our survey, you informed us that there was an interest about that, and so we're trying to fulfill that desire. Housing is just one of the many ways that the Maui Strong Fund is trying to make a difference on Maui. To date, we've raised just about $200 million. So far, about $110 million of that through over 200 different grants have been made. We'd hope that you'd take a look at our Maui Strong Fund Impact Report that can be accessed on our website at www.hawaiicommunityfoundation.org. You have a very comprehensive review of all of the work that has been done by our team and our community partners, some of which you'll hear from today. Go to the next slide. As challenging as the last year has been, we're really inspired about the possibilities for the future of Maui and the role it can play to prove that Hawaii can be affordable, especially around housing. We have an opportunity to address a long-standing root cause that the fire has really exacerbated and has really brought to light. We know that from our work on an initiative that HCF had been working on called House Maui, that before the fires, Maui was short 10,000 affordable units for its residents. That means that 1 out of every 2 families spends more than half of its income on housing. It means that those families are housing cost burdened. That threshold is anytime a family is spending more than 30% of its gross income, they will not have the necessary resources to pay for other items like transportation, like healthcare, like food, or any other unexpected expense that may come up. The fires wiped out an additional 3,000 structures and displaced more than 13,000 people overnight. That meant that in the immediate aftermath of the fires, people really had nowhere to go. And if not for your resources that you supported and the organizations that you're going to hear from today, I'm not sure that we've been able to service the families in the ways that we did. We started planning for interim housing as a way to stabilize their lives for the next 5 years so that they can stay on Maui and be a part of the re-envisioning of their community as Lahaina and Olinda and Kula are rebuilt. And we're looking ahead to permanent housing as a way to keep people on Maui and hopefully model for other island communities on how to overcome the housing challenges that we face. So today you're going to hear from two of our Maui Strong Fund partners, taking two very different approaches to building interim housing for our fire survivors. Your donations were extremely critical to to supporting them. We're very grateful for their leadership and their stepping up. It's been an amazing journey for us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle to get the program started. Again, mahalo, and I'll see you a little later in this webinar. Mahalo, everyone.
Thank you, Micah. And so next up, we will have, and it's really a pleasure for me to introduce to you Kūhiō Lewis, the CEO of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. Mahalo, Kūhiō, for taking the time to join us today. And before we get you started, I believe we're going to share a quick video and then turn it over to you.
Here at La'iku, and we called it La'iku because La'iku represents like this calming sense of refuge.
Someone from the state of Hawaii actually reached out to us, to CNHA, to ask if we'd be willing to take on another housing project.
And the funding to put up all of these homes came from Hawaii Community Foundation. These are the thousands and thousands of donors that gave to the Maui Strong Fund. This is where the dollars are going.
So this project started in about April, where we started to do a bunch of the site work, and it's going to be completed right around the end of September or early October. These homes were built on Hawaii Island, and they were barged over here. It had to be craned onto the foundation.
So there's actually 8 lots here, and we're putting 16 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes here. The rent's $17.50 a month, includes water, sewer. The only thing they got to pay for is electricity. And we chose 2 bedrooms because that was the hardest thing to find in Lahaina, is 2-bedroom units. And one of the challenges we've had with moving people out of hotels was that they have pets. So this is going to be a pet-friendly complex here, so you can have pets here. There's no income requirement to live here. We're of course giving priority to those with families. When these families move in, it's not just an empty house. The team will come in just before they arrive and fix it all up and make sure that they have the basic necessities. Many of the families have expressed interest in living in Lahaina. That's where they want to raise their families. This property will be available to them for up to 5 years. But I think what's most important is that they get to live in Lahaina. They're moving into a place where it's like a pu'uhonua, where they can be a part of a bigger community as well. It's hope. That's what happens when you come together and for the right purpose.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kūhiō Lewis. I'm the CEO for the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. It really is a privilege to be able to speak to all of those behind the scenes that have contributed to supporting the work of Hawaii Community Foundation. The Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement is, we've been around since 2001. We weren't necessarily created for the purposes of being an emergency response unit, but when kuleana or responsibility calls, you respond. And that's what's happened in this case. Is we saw a community that was suffering, and we pivoted a lot of our capacity to helping support Maui. And I'll be this effort to support Maui has also supported our organization in helping build our capacity, and by way of that, people of Maui. Our first slide, so next slide. Can I control this thing? No. Can you go to the next? Okay, there. So just by way of background, CNHA was on the ground pretty quickly. We were there just in a matter of days, and the first thing we stood up was our Kāko'o Maui Resource Center. For those unfamiliar with the term Kāko'o, you might have heard Kokua. Kāko'o is to be an extension of, to support or to uplift, and so we're an extension of Maui. But we opened our resource center just after the fire, and what it was a cultural way to help survivors navigate what would happen after the fire. So every service that you would find in the Federal Disaster Recovery Center, you would find in our resource center. But it was a cultural approach. You're greeted by a familiar face, and everything there felt like part of Hawaii's fabric, which was really important to folks' recovery. In our center, we offered assistance with applying for FEMA, mental health support, legal support, and whether it was just to navigate their insurance. It's quite complicated to apply for assistance or to navigate life after. We hired all Lahaina people that were from Lahaina. which was a big plus because people felt comfortable talking about their situation. Anyway, this resource center has been able to support over 6,000 survivors since it's opened, and it continues to serve that purpose today. Every day, people are walking into that resource center to get additional support. Next slide. Moving on to some of the housing programs. So one of the benefits of having a resource center is that you can collect data in real time. And so we were able to assess what the needs were quickly. And what we realized was that there were a lot of people staying with friends and family. And that's just part of Hawaii's fabric. That's part of who we are is, we're gonna support people where they need it. So we created what the host support program, which essentially provided those that were taking in survivors some financial assistance so we could lessen their burden. The last thing we wanted was more financial strain on families that just were trying to help. There are currently 236 families still in the host support program, but at its peak, there was a lot more. And what it did was it provided $500 per month for every person that they took in. So if you had a family of 5, you get $2,500. But it was a unique approach to recovery. It's not something that I think would work anywhere around the world, but it certainly would work in Hawaii, where that aloha spirit and its sense of community is very strong, especially in Lahaina. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So another program that has evolved from data that CNHA collected was a gap assistance program. So a lot of families have basically just been priced out of living on Maui, where rents skyrocketed. And Hawaii was already facing a housing crisis before the fire, but this exacerbated it quite significantly, and rent prices went out the roof. So we stood up what we call the Gap Assistance Program. And the Gap Assistance Program looks at what a family can afford to pay, what assistance they might be able to get from the federal or state government or even private foundations, and we cover the difference in rent. So if the rent's $5,000 and the family can only afford $1,500 and they're only getting $1,300 from the feds, we would cover the difference. So the Gap Assistance Program has been very supportive of folks that don't have enough resources to pay their rent. Right now, there's 47 families that are receiving gap assistance, but this is one of our more active programs. That number is going to grow quite significantly as people start to find housing on island. And I'm just focusing on housing programs. There's a lot more that CNHA is doing, but this is specific to housing. Okay, next slide. Another program that CNHA started up, this one was in partnership with Hawaii Community Foundation and the Red Cross, is we're directly leasing. So another challenge that families were facing were, landlords were, I don't want to say discriminating, but they were certainly giving survivors a hard time to apply for apartments. So what CNHA did was we just came in and we guaranteed their rent. And so we basically have 63 apartments that we are renting and we're subletting it to survivors. And we pay up to $7,000 a month to do that. In most cases, families aren't paying anything, but the goal of the program is to transition this into a place where they can start paying for it, or we can move them into interim housing. But this is another program that we have, is our direct leasing program, where we lease units and we sublease it to survivors. Next slide. And lastly, CNHA is building homes as well. This is more expensive approach but it's much more stable. So after paying numerous rents, $6,000-7,000 a month, we said, forget it. We're just going to start building houses. This doesn't make any sense. And so we launched our development arm, and right now CNHA has 66 homes that we are building. They're all 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes. And the reason why they're 2-bedroom, 1-bath is because that's what our data tells us the biggest gap is. There are 1-bedroom homes on island, not a significant amount, but there's enough to, the biggest need was 2-bedroom. So that's what we started to build, was 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes. This project is almost entirely funded by Hawaii Community Foundation. And so of the 66, we have, I believe, 15 or 16 that are available, and people are moving in right now. Next slide. So altogether, combined with all the different housing programs that CNHA currently administers, we're housing about 412 households or 900 individuals in our various spectrum of programs. One of the more recent programs that we just started is a grant program for families that lost their home. You know, trying to get back onto your property or trying to navigate the permitting process is not easy. And so we recognize having consultants on staff or even buying down interest points to take out a mortgage is helpful. So we've come up with another program that I don't have a slide for, but it's the newest program, and that's to give them $15,000 of pre-development money to help them as they start to repopulate in Lahaina. But what is the next slide? Yeah, so really none of the work that CNHA has been able to accomplish would have been possible had it not been for the resources from Hawaii Community Foundation, from the thousands and thousands of donors from across the world. They've been a phenomenal partner to us. CNHA's mission as an organization has been primarily to support Native Hawaiians, but in this time of need, recognizing that Hawaiians have a responsibility to help the people of Hawaii, we've put that to the side and we focused on how do we help Hawaii as a whole. And I think that's an important way to look at how we can become a community. And we were able to raise our own resources as a Native Hawaiian organization. CNHA has been able to raise about $40 million, coupled with the money that Hawaii Community Foundation has been able to provide. We've been able to make quite the impact. And so I want to thank all of the donors that have, you know, just been so supportive of Maui, supportive of the work that Hawaii Community Foundation is doing. And we look forward to continuing to support the people of Maui and supporting HCF and uplifting their mission. But that's what I wanted to share. And I'm going to be available to talk story a little bit more intimately afterwards. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Kūhiō, for that. And definitely we will be back to him to include him in our Q&A a little bit later. But next, it is a pleasure for me to introduce to you Kimo Carvalho, who is the Executive Director of HomeAid Hawai. And as Kūhiō shared, this is really about leveraging and partnering the resources that we each raise and to look for partnerships so that we can all work together to help the families of Maui. Thank you for being with us this morning, Kimo, and I'll turn it over to you for the next part.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'll dive right into my first slide if that's okay. So I represent HomeAid Hawai. We are a nonprofit developer that is focused on building housing solutions for people who are experiencing homelessness or really people who are just in a housing crisis. We're better known for working with Governor Green on his Kauhale initiative. This first photo here is one of our projects, Pula Ma'ola. This is the Kauhale that was located just outside of Queens Medical Center. But as you know, Micah mentioned earlier, achieving affordability, it is possible. For HomeAid Hawai, you know, rather than subsidizing affordability, our approach to the affordable housing crisis is to reduce the cost of construction by partnering with philanthropic donors and the building industry who wants to provide donated labor and materials, and partnering with government to utilize regulatory tools like emergency proclamations to build quicker. The reason it matters is because all this results in cost savings, and that is ultimately passed on to the end user, in this case, people who are in crisis and who really needs that deep affordability. We're talking anywhere from $500 to $750 a month in rent. So for the 16 developments that we've completed to date, we're averaging somewhere around 40% savings to achieve that deep affordability. So just a little bit about who we are in our model. But if you go to the next slide, and the reason we're here today is to really talk about Kalaiola. We currently have 5 active construction projects, and Kalaiola is the largest of all of them. Kalaiola, this is the site plan. It's located in the Wahikuli and Leali'i area, just in West Maui. So if you're coming off of the the bypass and you're heading toward Ka'anapali, that is the area that we're developing in just above. That was actually part of the burn zone. So the fire originated there and came through the Wahikuli area. So we're building just above there. This project, it's a public-private partnership between the state of Hawaii, Hawaii Community Foundation, and the building and transportation industries. Kalaiola is an interim housing program for Maui wildfire survivors who are ineligible for FEMA assistance. So for whatever reason, they are unable to access FEMA resources and therefore they're stuck. And so we're responding to them with the state. We've designed a new approval processes to build quickly without compromising on health, safety, culture, or environment. So from start to finish, this project duration will probably be just about under a year. It will result in 450 homes for approximately 2,500 individuals. And one of the outcomes of this project I hope for is really to model these new processes that we've developed to support our housing solutions in this housing crisis. But the land is currently owned by HHFDC. It's been leased to the Department of Health Department of Human Services for 5 years. Under DHS, HomeAid Hawai will remain the land asset manager throughout the 5-year duration. And after the 5 years, we will support transferring the land to Department of Hawaiian Homelands, which actually further speeds up development for this area by 17 years to provide beneficiaries who's been stuck on the wait list and providing them with permanent housing for DHHL. So we're really proud of the deal that we were able to broker with the government lands and transferring that and installing permanent infrastructure so that we can achieve that long-term goal. But really, we're really grateful to Hawaii Community Foundation, who's really been able to allow us to purchase these modular homes to support interim housing solutions. And just before I go to the next slide, this picture here on the top left is where we're going to be doing the Honokauai water tank. It's a 400,000 gallon water tank, one of the largest infrastructure projects in West Maui's most recent history. But you can see government is paying for the roads, sewer, water, electrical, internet infrastructure, and Hawaii Community Foundation coming in with the modular homes and the shipping to support quick development of the site. So if you go to the next slide, what we're hearing from the federal government partners, especially, is that there's never really been a development that's focused on creating a sense of community through interim housing in these disaster situations. But that's what Kalaiola does. It's a place where people can heal, recover, rebuild their lives. We fully expect that investment in interim housing with this quality healing spaces and services, that hopefully it does reduce costs in health and human services over the long term in comparison to other post-disaster interim housing communities. We do fully plan on studying that over time. But this is the Makai view rendering of the site. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the Mauka view rendering of the site. And so you can just kind of get a sense for, just kind of the feeling and the tone that we're going for in terms of really creating a sense of stability in this time to rebuild. Kalaiola will provide a 1-year rent-free grace period. This provides opportunities for our people to regain and rebuild their incomes as well. That's a huge part of this equation, just as Kūhiō kind of mentioned, and hopefully it also utilizes time to achieve upward economic mobility. We saw after the Great Recession that 35% of the middle class got stuck in poverty, and it was really hard to rebound from that situation. So we're really trying to make sure that we have economic tools built into this so that we can help them achieve some financial stability as well. If you go to the next slide, just a quick 1-minute video, and I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
This is the culmination after a year of being able to come together and show how much we love one another and how much we care about each other. I've never seen a community come together the way that this community has come together, and people watched as Maui struggled and suffered and has rebuilt. People have a newfound, unfathomable respect for the people of Hawaii, and I know that because as governor they tell me that over and over again.
A lot of these families, their lives have been on pause for this entire past year. We learned that many of them, while grateful for their lives and surviving this, terrible disaster, that they really appreciated a lot of the services and the programs being offered, but still at the very core and at the base, what they really needed was a home. Kumu Hula Pueopata gifted the name Kalaiola a place of peaceful recovery. It is a place for you to heal, to recover, to rebuild your lives, so that you may achieve your full potential right here in your own hometown, here in Lahaina in West Maui. Welcome to your home. And then I think there's just one more slide, and this is the website, kalai'ola.org. For anybody who's interested in applying or learning more or signing up for our newsletters, please go to the website. But just in closing, and I echo what Kūhiō said, just a huge mahalo to Hawaii Community Foundation, really to bring forward interim housing solutions in a very critical time. You know, getting to meet these families, and like I said, their lives have been on pause. They have, you know, really struggled to stabilize a job, to get their kids in consistent education, and to live a temporary life for a year has been, you know, it's unfathomable. And so just the fact that we get to open this first pod, and we will be opening one pod every other week, as we get to 270 units by the end of the year, and the remaining 180 by March 2025. So, you know, we're opening as we're building, and we are very grateful just for the partners at the table to really make this opportunity possible. Mahalo, everyone. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Kimo and Kūhiō, both really inspiring to see families actually moving into these interim housing units. So as we've heard from Kūhiō and Kimo about efforts around interim housing, our next guest speaker is Jeff Gilbreath, who is the Executive Director of Hawaii Community Lending. And Jeff is going to walk us through what are the next steps in the journey for fire survivors. What's the journey that they're on, beginning with a discussion around what do we need to do to get to permanent housing. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jeff. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Michelle. Honored to be here with you folks. And as Michelle shared, we will be talking about a program that has been funded by Hawaii Community Foundation, the local banks, but really a mahalo to all you folks on this call who put your dollars where they matter. But this is all about how do we transition families from this interim space that Kūhiō and Kimo talked about to permanent housing. Next slide, please. Here are all the funders and partners that we need to mahalo. There are more that need to be included in terms of partners who are helping deliver this program, but we couldn't do it without these folks. Next slide. Who Hawaii Community Lending is, we're what's called a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution. We are focused on getting access to credit and capital to local and Native Hawaiian families, so they can build, buy, and save homes from foreclosure. Next slide. The program that I'm going to be speaking about a bit today is really a partnership between Hawaii Community Lending, Hawaii Community Foundation, the local banks, and it's all geared toward the 500 Lahaina owner-occupant homeowners who were living in their homes at the time of the fire, and to determine what do they need in order to, one, stop a foreclosure on a property where there is no home standing because they have an existing mortgage. And number two, go through the process that Kūhiō had mentioned that's oftentimes very complex, and folks are skipping steps in that process. And then getting the capital that these folks need, deferred loans, grants, and financing to be able to make the rebuild happen. Next slide. I wanted to give you folks just a quick snapshot of what our team does day in and day out with families. So we have homeowners who are from Lahaina, folks who've gone through the same hardship as families coming into our program. But our Lahaina homeowner staff are delivering these services. And it all starts with what expenses do you have, what dollars do you have, or resources right now? And what I can tell you is that every family that has stepped into our office and worked with our family or worked with our staff have lost income. They have less income and higher expenses than pre-fire. But once we get that assessment completed, we then can advocate. And the first step that our team does, if you have a mortgage, is to secure a forbearance and to stop foreclosure. The second is really to look at all of the resources that are available to the family that they may be struggling to get. FEMA and SBA denials are extremely high in our program for homeowners who've been going through this, primarily due to the fact that families have received loss of use monies from their insurance proceeds as a homeowner. And this has complicated the rules of both FEMA and SBA. Our team fights to get those appeals filed. We work with United policyholders to file insurance claims. And we also are submitting complaints as it relates to mortgage servicers to the Department of Financial Institutions at DCCA, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, if there's actions servicers are taking that is outside the letter of the law. Once we get to this point, it's really the hardest discussion that our team has. It's a decision between rebuilding or selling, and we create a plan for that goal. Families have come into us week after week. We've often had the same conversations. These folks are going through extreme trauma. This decision is not easy, and it oftentimes takes meeting multiple times before we can get a path forward. We then pull together the budget to figure out how much can the family actually afford to rebuild, what grants or subsidies or loans do we need to bring in, and then, and only then, are we in a position to help the families rebuild at a price point that they can afford. Skipping any of these first 4 steps and going straight to rebuild is having major ramifications on the family's situation. Next slide, please. I want to give you folks a quick snapshot. So far, we have 206 of the 500 owner-occupant homeowners who have come into the program and been serviced. You'll see on one part of this chart, you have homes destroyed, so families with homes destroyed, and homes damaged in the other column. I would just note, you can see those with homes destroyed, we're looking on average, homeowners are under 80% area median income. So $97,000 for a 4-person household. And you can see they have existing mortgage debt, and their homeowner insurance proceeds are not even enough to cover that. When you look at damaged homes, we're seeing $30,000 less in annual household income amongst those folks. They are slightly above 60% area median income. And you can see those damaged home folks are fighting hard to get very little in homeowner insurance proceeds. Our program solves for that. Next slide. Based on these 6 criteria, our organization has created 20 different pathways that homeowners may need to take depending on their situation. If you have a mortgage, we do need to work with the mortgage servicer. If you don't, we don't have to have that step. That's one example. But all of these other factors go into this. And so our team does that assessment with the families. We then determine which of the 20 different pathways does that homeowner go on, and we start moving them through the process. Next slide, please. You guys have heard a lot about numbers and thanks to you folks for funding and the partnerships, but I think it's really critical right now that we just root ourselves in what the families are experiencing. You can imagine families are walking through our doors, and nearly 100% of those who are enrolling have lost income. The business that was down the street they worked at burnt. The place of employment that had them employed for decades wasn't able to keep its doors open. This is creating a serious impact on the family's finances. So now they're in this place of being very low and low income. You can imagine you're a community member who's been promised the moon by different entities, government agencies, nonprofits, volunteers. There is a significant amount of distrust in community of any program that's coming out. We break that down by having folks who are from Lahaina, of Lahaina, and been impacted to be at the point of the spear in delivering the services. We're seeing foreclosure notices being issued to families illegally right now when they're on a forbearance plan and prior to the moratorium. And so you can imagine folks going to sleep at night paying the $7,000 in rent or having that being paid by an entity, as Kūhiō kind of shared, but they're still worried about paying that mortgage on a property, again, where a home isn't standing. Homeowners are confused about the process. We see them skipping steps. They're getting pointed to go get your house plans, go pick your contractor before you even know what you can afford. We've seen families pay up to $10,000 because they skip steps in the process to get their plans ready. They got a contractor only to find out that home And those plans are going to cost $1.2 million, which this family just doesn't have. That $10,000 is lost. Now we got to go back to the beginning and try and make it good. We also saw families survey their lots when their lots weren't ready. Paid $5,600 to get a survey within 60 days. And then the pins had to be pulled by water departments so that work could be done on the lot. It wasn't ready. That family paid $5,600, but they don't have a survey that actually means anything now. We're seeing delays and denials from insurance providers of folks with damaged homes. They are not paying for the hygienist tests that need to happen, the structural engineer that needs to come in, the contractors for homes that are still standing but have been damaged by smoke and toxic ash. These insurance companies paid out a big amount of money to folks who had destroyed homes. And this appears to be a tactic for them to try and preserve some resources that they may have by not allowing for those things to move forward. We have solved for that. We have worked to raise money separately from the funds that HCF has provided to be able to pay for a public insurance adjuster, to be able to pay for the hygienist tester, so that we can get to some sort of solution. It's a long, drawn-out process. Homeowners are receiving insurance proceeds, as you saw in our snapshot, but most of them are using this just for basic living expenses. Their loss of use money from their insurance company is running out. We're now appealing to FEMA to try and get them an approval since they were denied because they had loss of use money. Hopefully that works. But we see families using those insurance proceeds that otherwise they could use to rebuild just to live because the expenses are so high. And I can't impress this enough. Homeowners don't have enough money to rebuild. That is clear. You can go to the next slide for me. I wanted to give you folks an analysis, share with you top line what our analysis looks like of homeowners with homes destroyed and those with homes damaged. You'll note there's an asterisk there for homes damaged. This is assuming because the home has toxic and smoke damage, toxic ash and smoke damage, they're going to have to tear down to the studs and rebuild. So you look at, in terms of the existing mortgage and the cost to rebuild, it's a little higher for the damaged folks to rebuild because of that need to tear down to the studs and rebuild. Folks with damaged homes have a little bit lower mortgage balance, but you're seeing the estimated total cost, if you include the mortgage and the rebuild costs, right around $1 million. You can see the insurance proceeds and the SBA loan averages that we've been able to pull down for families, get them applied for. But that's not enough. As you can see, this estimated gap that we're seeing, we're anticipating the need for an average of up to $350,000 in subsidies, deferred payment loans, principal forgiveness, and partial claims by the mortgage servicers to actually get to rebuild in a way that the families can afford the payments going forward. And next slide for me. Next steps, what we see is that until we can secure funding commitments to cover this gap, it doesn't make a lot of sense to build out a massive program with construction management services, with services for development, until we truly can understand what is that number of homeowners who can actually rebuild. Until we can secure those commitments, whether it's through the CDBG disaster recovery program or other county, state, Hawaiian homelands, or private funding sources, we won't know that number of homeowners who will actually need to move through that process. Every lot is going to need a survey, whether you're going to rebuild or sell. There are no property lines. So we got to first do a step we believe is probably the most impactful step we could take right now, which is to do a comprehensive lot survey of those owner-occupant homeowners. And HCL is currently talking with other entities to fund other properties. Hopefully, this is something that can roll out, a program that can roll out very soon. And then last is really to inform a strategy for construction management services. As I shared with you folks, so many people are taking steps out of order, skipping steps, and it's costing tens of thousands of dollars. That may be the difference from them being able to rebuild or not. So those are areas where we really need to do some work. I appreciate you folks. That's all I have. Happy to answer any questions as we come to the next section.
Thank you, Jeff. And to all of our speakers, there we go. Sorry, my video. There we go. So thank you all for being here. We're going to move into a Q&A session. And so I welcome folks to put your questions in the chat, and I will address those questions as they are arising. But first, I just wanted to, the first question was really around the differences between HomeAid and CNHA in the two different projects, and primarily private funded project through the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and then a very collaborative funding model of public-private partnership. Kimo, if you can talk to us a little bit about your partners and the funding structure of the HomeAid project.
Absolutely. So for the total cost, we could see a project like this where, there's a site that has been completely undeveloped. I mean, it was just rock and dirt. So to come in, these kind of projects can be pretty expensive to bring in sewer, water, electrical, in the upwards of, over $200 million. Fortunately, what we were able to achieve, however, from a financial stack is by bringing in the government to provide the land free of charge, to provide to leverage other contracts and services from Department of Transportation, HHFDC, DHL, Department of Human Services. So it's a multi-agency approach that also brings down the cost. And so we're able to really kind of create a capital stack around just the public sources. And then where I've always believed that the public sector, where it benefits the public, they should always invest in permanent infrastructure, permanent services, but where it is temporary is in the interim housing specific strategy. And this is where the private sector, mainly through Hawaii Community Foundation, through philanthropy, was able to contribute. But we're also seeing other partners. For example, Matson is coming in with $5 million of discounted shipping. We're seeing, Phillips Water Tank, a lot of the electrical materials. So there's a lot of other private businesses that are coming in at deep discounts to really bring that cost down as best we can. So that's kind of the collaborative public-private model. And as HomeAid, the role we play is what we call fund control. So really, we're able to really sort of dissect our project management schedule and allocate funds to each line item to make sure that we're able to fund and achieve our funding goals either through these financial resources or through the discounts.
Thanks, Kimo. I mean, and for our guests that have joined us today, I think when we look at the Maui Strong Fund and we see the allocation that was provided for interim housing, I hope that this helps to articulate that there is a high need for stabilizing families so that they could make decisions about where their children should go to school, how they can get back to work. And so having shelter that is stable for the next several years was truly critical. And as you hear from Jeff, we see some of the challenges that homeowners just don't have enough resource. Kūhiō, my question for you would be just sort of like, what are you seeing as some of the number one challenges once families are settled? What are you seeing from the families that you're working with as they get into the homes? What are the other big areas of focus that we need to pay attention to?
Well, this is a real multifaceted approach that requires agility and flexibility as we move forward. So CNH is not focused on just building houses. We're providing support in all kinds of different ways. We're providing different types of housing programs, but we're also providing wraparound support. So workforce development, the whole industry has shifted in Lahaina. So helping them find jobs where it matters is how they're going to be able to find greater stability. So I think that one of the challenges that we face in the future is staying focused on Lahaina's evolving needs and being agile as a collective. For the most part, it's been a great collaboration. It's not often that the private sector, the governor, the mayor, and others come together the way that they have to ensure just quick response. that's something that in itself is a model for the state in terms of what's possible. And so biggest challenges is just for me, it's just everyone being agile, not getting distracted, staying focused, collaborating, and working together till this is done, until there's people are in homes or finding stability.
Thanks, Kūhiō. Jeff, we have a question around insurance. And can you talk a little bit about why the insurance proceeds are so low for those damaged homes?
Sure. So, right now, what we're seeing from the insurance providers for damaged homes is that we have to realize first that insurance providers paid out significant amount of money with destroyed homes. Those are total loss, and they paid those out. When it comes to damaged homes, there's been a different mentality, I would say, from the insurance providers, and it's to essentially see that home standing and assume that there is no damage that would create that as a total loss. Unfortunately, what we're finding is that those homes are likely smoke damage and toxic ash involved, as I said, and are in fact a total loss. The proceeds are so low because what you're seeing right now is that is essentially the settlement that the insurance company is willing to provide right now, until a public insurance adjuster or a group like United Policyholders can get in there to negotiate a settlement that is more fair for the family, in light of the fact that there are these issues. Now, insurance providers are not funding the hygienist test, the contractors, the structural engineers who are needed to be able to confirm it's a total loss, right? Typically, they would pay for that. In any other disaster, they would pay for that. They're not paying for it. So it necessitates us to raise the funds to pay for that up front, and then push the insurance provider. A good example is a hygienist test has to be done by someone who's federally certified and licensed. We essentially set up an agreement with them where they test a group of homes to reduce the cost. We pay that out in grant funds, and what that does is it provides a report that now the insurance providers have to respond to within 3 weeks, 21 days. It puts a timeline on their response, and so that's where we're at with those current insurance proceeds issues. We continue to work on it, but it's a hard, long, drawn-out fight.
Thanks.
And Michelle, I do see some that second question from Ray regarding state monitoring and finding private vendors. I would just a point of clarification. I don't in the instances that we've seen of families skipping steps and going to contractors or getting the survey of the lot, they're doing this not illegally. They're doing this at the request of the homeowner. The homeowner is not informed about the process. They're not doing anything illegal. They're providing the services the homeowner is asking for. Issue is that we have embraced this narrative that the first step in rebuilding is going to buy your plans and get a contractor, and that's just not the first step. The first step is you got to figure out what resources do you have to rebuild so we can have a budget to understand. So there's no I would just make that point on that second question, Michelle.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the question was around if the state was finding private vendors who are illegally taking advantage of these homeowners. So as Jeff has described, it's not necessarily illegal actions, but there's a lot of confusion around the proper steps that families who have been impacted directly by the fire, whether total loss or just damage to the home, and what those appropriate steps are. And to that, I'll just say that the critical nature of the partnerships from our partners here on the call today, and to what Kūhiō talked about, that this is a new situation and a new kind of disaster response for all of us, that the magnitude and the complexity of this recovery is much different than what we've seen in other disasters, from Kilauea lava or the landslides on Kauai. The scale and the magnitude of this disaster is so different, and the federal resource that is available for this disaster is different. And so helping families navigate through this process is really critical. I will say that the one thing I'm extremely proud of our state and just Hawaii and outside the state of Hawaii through our donor base, is that the way the community has come together to really develop solutions to address the situation. And while not perfect, I do think that there has been an extremely positive, demonstration of what is possible when we collaborate through all of these examples that each of you have shared today. The other question that we see here is, are the businesses, and I know that this is not about housing in particular, but if anybody has information, and maybe Micah, you might want to chime in, are the businesses that were destroyed in Lahaina getting some help as well?
Maybe I'll defer to Kūhiō. You're probably closest to that, and I'll cover over you if you based on what I see right now.
I'll answer it as best as I can. I think that came from Cheryl. The short answer is more can be done, more should be done. The focus has primarily been on getting people in housing. The federal government, of course, through their SBA program, has stepped up to quite significantly to help businesses. From the private sector, from the state sector, we continue to collaborate to look at ways to support businesses. An example of that is we are actively working with Hawaii Tourism Authority as well as the County of Maui to create an incubator where businesses that were destroyed can have like a marketplace to support them interim until a longer term solution can be developed. So that's actively going on, and I think we're probably a couple months away from something like that coming online. Same thing for restaurants that were burned, looking at a co-op kind of model just to keep them keep them afloat, just to keep their brands alive. So things are being worked on. We need to move faster for the business community, and there's a lot more that could be done.
Yeah, I would agree with Kūhiō. I think on this issue we're behind the curve, and there's a lot of complexity around this issue in terms of the location of their businesses, create challenges going forward. The amount of funding needed to support this sector is limited and doesn't go far. And so we're dealing with a pretty complicated situation. And I know the county has launched their long-term recovery plan right now. Getting businesses back up and going is a critical focus. But I think, as Kūhiō stated, I think we're behind the curve on this one.
Yeah, and then the last comment I'll make about businesses is that we are considering at the Community Foundation, both CNHA and HCL, Hawaii Community Lending, are CDFIs, as Jeff mentioned earlier, which are basically community loan funds. And we are having a discussion internally about the appropriate level of funding that should or could be dedicated to these CDFIs. Because we don't know what we don't know, right? We know that access to capital is going to be key for some of these businesses. And should we be setting aside an allocation of the strong funds so that CDFIs can help these businesses reopen, replenish their inventory, or whatever the situation is? And so that is an ongoing conversation about how we provide patient, low-cost capital to businesses so that they can get back into the marketplace. And then, go ahead.
If I could just add, the other thing I think folks need to keep in mind is the landscape of Lahaina, as we've known it, is going to change. So like Front Street, the way Front Street looked, it's going to look very different because there's all kind of regulations now in place in terms of egress. And so we also need to look at like, what does the future of Lahaina look like and build for that future? And I think that's all relative and important as we factor in how we support them. So just something I want to throw out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that why that is slower on the business side, Kūhiō raises a very good point. And we have a mayor who's extremely committed to community input and making sure that we're not running too far ahead, but that we're working with community as those plans get rolled out. And so it is taking a little bit of time, but have faith that we will definitely be addressing and not ignoring the needs of our business community. And then the last question that we have in the chat is whether or not the Maui Strong Fund is still the best fund for your dollars to be donated to, or are there others? And I will just say to that question that there are many folks raising dollars and many good causes. We are working collectively, and the Maui Strong Fund serves as an intermediary. So while we don't directly lead or run those programs, we are doing a lot of due diligence and are not charging a fee for that. But there are many good causes, and so that's really a donor decision. And if there's any questions that folks have about other places, we're happy to assist with that. Those are all the questions that I see in our Q&A for now. And so, Micah, I will turn it back to you. We have about 4 minutes left in our time, and so I'll turn it back to you to close us out for today.
There's one that
Right.
popped up.
Go ahead,
Michelle.
Kūhiō.
No, there's a question that pops up.
Sorry, what have our speakers seen, heard, experienced in the aftermath of the fires that gives you hope for the future of Maui? I love that question. Thank you, Eric. And I'll just do a quick run around for each of you before we go back to Micah. What gives you hope?
I'll just say the resilience of the Maui community, their spirit is alive. It's well. The one of the most powerful things for me is being able to give somebody keys to a home or to their future, at least in the short term. It's very powerful, and you can see like their sense of relief. They want to stay in Lahaina. That provides me hope to keep doing this work, because you don't want to, like that spirit that they have is what I think over generations has kept us here in Hawaii, and is what will continue to keep us in Hawaii. So that's the hope that I think I hang on to, that they hang on to. And I will say it's important for us as a collective to find ways to empower Maui people to support themselves in their own recovery. That's important for us, is that the baton, it needs to go to them, because recovery is part of their future. And anyway, that's what provides me hope, is the ability to give them keys and see them live another day in Lahaina.
Thank you, Kūhiō. Kimo?
I echo what Kūhiō said. I don't want to repeat. I agree. I'll answer this from the construction side. What gives me hope? Something that I've experienced that is unlike anything I ever thought, was really the county's ability to come to the table, to bring the right people together to fast track decisions, to make sure that we're able to build as quickly as possible. And I think what gives me hope is that there's a path forward and an opportunity and a way to really model what we've done. What gives me hope is that, in the broader scheme of our housing crisis, and this county was very difficult to build in prior to the wildfires. And so I think what gives me hope is that, there is a way, there's a template, and there's people who have, there's at least a framework of people who've come together who at least have this baseline of knowledge on how we can move forward together. And to Micah's earlier point, to continue to collaborate moving forward in the long term beyond the fires. That's what gives me hope.
Thank you, Kimo. And Jeff?
I think it's been really powerful to see on our team families who felt the impact of the fire and continue to feel that, be in a position to help families to the next step, to be able to share an understanding of this significant trauma that none of us can truly understand unless we've been there, and to see them have the strength to be able to say, hey, I'm gonna pull you over here. We're gonna walk together on this next step. And I think that's really powerful to see. And that's what's gonna, I think to Kūhiō's point, the capacity and the resiliency of the Lahaina community. Lahaina can solve this, and families can solve this for themselves. It's what can we do to support them to do so.
Thank you, Jeff. And before I turn it over to you, Micah, I just want to mahalo all three of you, because one of the things that gives me hope is having leaders as yourselves on the ground, doing the hard work, engaging the families who were impacted, giving them voice and agency in the problem solving. And so I just want to mahalo you for all the hard work. I know it has not been easy, but you have all been amazing to work with and alongside. And so, Micah, I turn it over to you to close us out for today.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for everyone for joining us. A lot of good questions. you've just heard from three very critical and important organizations in the recovery. They play critical roles in the ecosystem of the recovery. Kūhiō and his team, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, is a very agile, very Silicon Valley kind of approach. They don't have no in their vocabulary. And so they're willing to try new things, model new things, do new things, and really dive in where we need them. Kimo Carvalho and HomeAid, they're helping us to really understand scale and how do we deliver great product, great service at scale while partnering with government and breaking down a lot of the bureaucracies that challenge building affordability. And we're going to lean on that going forward as we move into permanent housing. And Kimo, you've done a great job at that. Jeff, you've been critical of being a continuum of the entire journey of a family from the time that they've been affected by the fire and displaced all the way into trying to get them back to permanent housing and all the difficulties that lie in that journey. You've helped us. So that's what you've got today is this continuum of activities that are being addressed by the three organizations today. I also want to acknowledge the governor and the mayor for their support. Governor Green and Mayor Bisson have welcomed us as a collective of nonprofit organizations to be at the table with them. We just wouldn't be here without them. And in the spirit of the way that he operates in much flexibility, I want to give the last minute to Kūhiō. He's going to try to share a video, and it may not work, and it may work. If it doesn't, I'll just sign off quickly. But I want to give Kūhiō an opportunity to show a 1-minute video that really speaks to
participants can now see your application. You have started screen share.
Go ahead, Kūhiō.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm going to just play a video that I think summarizes, the work that's going on. You get to see a family moving in and finding some stability. But mahalo everybody for being part of this call.
When we lost our home in August of last year, it was a blur. But when we started to have to look for housing for our family of 5, it started to get a little scary because of rent prices and the lack of housing over here. Then we went to our friends at Kūhiō Maui who really helped us with getting in touch with all of you folks at CNHA to assist us in placing somewhere that was going to be more long-term for us. The best part about this is everybody coming together and helping us with whatever we need. We are headed to Mary Monarch. This year, there's 6 of us dancing that have lost their homes in the Lahaina wildfire. It's kind of crazy what hula does to you and what it takes away, like we give so much of like sharing everything that we can that we've learned from our kumu, from our kupuna, but what hula gives back to me is a sense of place. And so we're just super grateful that we were able to get assistance from you all and just the support.
So that So I think my camera won't go back on, but I just want to again thank everybody for joining us, to our organizations who've been part of the journey, to our donors who've been part of this process. Mahalo for your continued support. Please stay tuned for other AO series coming up. Thank you for staying with us and have a great day, everyone, and a great week. Mahalo.